Spreading throughout the lands of Beleriand and beyond, the Noldor established many settlements and kingdoms, the greatest of which included Hithlum, originally founded by High King Fingolfin, Nevrast and Gondolin, founded by King Turgon, the realms of East Beleriand under the sons of Feanor, Nargothrond with King Finrod, Dorthonion under Angrod and Aignor, and the later realms of Lindon under Gil-galad, Eregion led by Celebrimbor, and Imladris ruled by Elrond. Leading the war effort against Morgoth, many Noldor warriors like Glorfindel and Ecthelion earned fame throughout Middle-earth, but most of their great heroes traced their lineage to the House of Finwë, with many of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren becoming kings and great lords ruling over their own realms. Yet, while the Noldor greatly impacted the history of Middle-earth, they did so alongside the Amanyar Elves, who never traveled to Valinor and therefore were already well established in these lands. As the Noldor Elves lived on the other side of the Misty Mountains, it was the Sindar of Beleriand who suffered most in the war against Morgoth. Divided into numerous subgroups, the Eglath and Lathrim Sindar lived in the kingdom of Doriath under their old leader Elwë, who awoke from his trance to become High King Eleuthingol. Other Sindar who did not live in this realm but still took Thingol as their king were the Falathrim, who populated the havens of the Falas under Lord Círdan, as well as those who settled in Nevrast and Hithlum. Among the many famous Sindar who lived throughout the ages, there was High King Eleuthingol, his daughter Luthien, and grandson King Dior, Lord Círdan the Shipwright, King Oropher, his son Thranduil and grandson Legolas, and Lord Celeborn, who married the Noldor maiden Galadriel, granddaughter of Finwë. Though they took little part in the War of Great Jewels throughout the First Age, the Noldor Elves in the center of the continent developed their own culture and history, sundering further into the Sylvan or Wood Elves, who loved the forests and were somewhat isolationists, and the Lyquendi or Green Elves, who defied the superstitions of their people to follow Denethor, son of Linwë, and at last crossed the Misty Mountains to settle in Osiriand. Already divided into numerous factions and groups, there were two more terms that could be applied to the Elven race to further distinguish their sundering throughout history, with those who saw the light of Valinor called the Calequendi or Light Elves, while the rest were the Morequendi or Dark Elves. Originally, this meant the Vanyar, Noldor, and Falmeri were Calaquendi, while the Avari, Nandor, and most of the Sindar were Morequendi. Yet as the ages went on, the term Dark Elf took on a more specific meaning, describing those with more isolationist tendencies, who preferred shadowy forests to open skies, such as Eol, the Dark Elf of the First Age, or the Sylvan and Avari Elves in later ages. Playing a vital role in the history of Middle-earth for thousands of years, it was in the Fourth Age, after the final defeat of the second Dark Lord Sauron, that many of the elves were ready to depart for the Undying Lands, though not all of their kind shared the same fate. Continuing to serve under King Ingwe of Taniquetil, the Vanyar were ever faithful servants of the Valar, following them proudly into the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age. The Amanyar Noldor also fought in the War of Wrath, but otherwise lived peacefully under King Finarfin in Tirion. As for the Falmari of Alqualonde and Tol Eressëa under King Olwe, they suffered greatly throughout the first kinslaying, and as a result greatly resented the Noldor and refused to fight on their behalf during the War of Wrath. Unlike their peaceful kin in Aman, the Etian Goldi lost many realms and leaders throughout the years of war in Middle-earth, ultimately migrating as refugees to whatever elven strongholds were available, eventually mixing and interbreeding with the Sindar, Lyquendi, and Sylvan Elves. Similarly, the Sindar felt the sting of many losses throughout the years of fighting, losing so many leaders and realms. They too became refugees, mixing with the Noldor, Lyquendi, and Sylvan. Formerly of the Nandor, the Lyquendi were led by their beloved King Denethor, and were so upset after losing him in the First Battle of Beleriand, they retreated to Osiriand and became isolationists, refusing to participate in future conflicts. Those who survived the fall of Beleriand at the end of the First Age then had no choice but to mix with the Noldor and Sindar refugees to establish the kingdom of Lindon under Gil-galad. Further east, the Sylvan lived for many years as simple forest dwellers, until found by Noldor and Sindar nobles, who created the Woodland Realm and Kingdom of Lothlorien. Ruled by the Sindar king Orofer and later his son Thranduil, the Sylvan Elves of the Woodland Realm remained relatively isolationist, while King Amdir, his son Amroth, and later Galadriel and Celeborn ruled over the Sylvan of Lothlorien, where they eventually mixed with migrating Noldor and Sindar. This left only the Avari of the Far East, who over the years did explore beyond their homeland. Yet despite some migrating westward, they rarely interacted with the Eldar Elves, whom they considered arrogant deserters, though some were on good terms with the Sylvan, occasionally interacting and mixing together. Growing and changing in so many ways since first waking in the lands of Cuiviénen, the immortal elves were tied to this world, and while their bodies could decay and be destroyed, their spirits and consciousness lived on until the end of all things. Thus it was that many of their kind began to depart Middle-earth at the end of the Third Age and well into the Fourth, at last taking up place alongside their kin in the Undying Lands. Yet not all elves underwent the journey, with some, like the Sylvan and Avari, remaining behind to live out their days in mortal lands. Unfortunately, without the enchanted magic of Valinor to preserve them, the bodies of those who stayed in Middle-earth did eventually decay and fade away, leaving only the unhoused spirits of the elves. Once the body of an elf passed away, their spirit could go to the halls of Mandos, where the dead rested and might be reborn into a new body, yet this was not mandatory, and so some elven spirits never moved on, and continued to wander unseen across the lands of Middle-earth. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Soul Guide Medical, Sir Jeremiah Ironside of House Comsia, Sir Dayron of House Ashford, and Chris Walder the Crimson Shadow. If you'd like to help the channel, go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can sign up and gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and access the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.